It feels so good to talk about a Western animated show with such passion again. Seriously, the last time I was this invested in an American animated series was Steven Universe. That's not to say there haven't been great shows in the time between these two series. I'm sure there have been, but Owl House is the one that's taken over my life. So that's what I'm going to talk about. Quick recap for the uninitiated. The Owl House is an animated series made by Dana Terrace that started airing at the start of last year. I didn't actually catch it back then though. I only got around to watching it once the first season dropped on Disney+. You know, everyone's 9th favorite streaming service. Anyway, the show's about a quirky and endlessly energetic girl named Luce, who, by complete accident, ends up finding herself in a crazy fantasy world called the Boiling Isle. There, she meets Ida the Owl Lady, a powerful witch who decides to take Luce on as her apprentice at the end of the show's first episode. And that neatly brings us to the first of the Owl House's many great qualities, its characters. Each one is incredibly likable, interesting, and hilarious, and that's only bolstered by great character design. Luce, to start with, is a really well-rounded protagonist. She's endlessly curious about magic and the strange, crazy things in the Boiling Isles, which gives her at least one thing in common with the audience, and that curiosity tends to get her into trouble. Despite all that though, she's still a really kind kid who isn't shy about lending a helping hand. One of my favorite moments in Season 1 is when Luce is facing off with the Bat Queen, and after finding out she's a talisman, she immediately stops trying to hurt her. They just have an honest conversation with each other, and Lucy even offers to help the Bat Queen find her creator if she wants that. It's a really strong character beat in an already great episode. I find the arc her character undergoes to be really compelling. Across the series, Luce is constantly made to realize that things aren't as simple or as easy as she'd expect, and it really naturally turns her self-destructive curiosity into a tempered drive to learn more about the world around her and help her friends. One of my favorite instances of this comes from the first episode of Season 2. In it, Luce is forced to face the fact that she's been kind of a burden to Ida, and that realization drives her to try and make up for it by correcting the fallout from the first season finale. Season 2 has been nothing but bangers, but this still might be my favorite episode from what's been aired. King is basically the best possible version of a cute mascot character. He's adorable, obviously, and the way his delusional confidence contrasts with his bouts of childlike rage is consistently hilarious.
Ida! That monster took my throne! I want you to go over there and blow him up! Kaboom! Kaboom!
King's also just a really compassionate person. Demon, and his friendship with Luce is incredibly heartwarming. One of the things I love about the writing of the Owl House is how it's able to play up its characters' flaws both for laughs and for genuine drama, and I think King is probably the best example of this. The selfishness that stems from his beliefs about his status is hilarious, but when taken too far, he can be genuinely hurtful, and that leads to some really great episodes when it puts him at odds with Luce or Ida. Speaking of which, Ida's been my favorite character basically since she appeared on screen. She's a total rogue with a charm so magnetic it has its own gravitational pull, a strong moral compass, or anti-moral compass maybe, and the way her dynamic with Luce seamlessly switches from strangers to mentor and teacher to friends, and then family is just, it's perfect.
I love you, Ida.
I love you too, kiddo.
I find it really endearing how her priorities shift as she becomes more entwined to the group dynamic. It leads to some really satisfying moments of character growth, like when she realizes she may have been holding Luce back by not letting her go to Hexside, and then spends the rest of the episode trying to get her in. Also, she's hilarious.
You can have it. Your life is pretty terrible. But hey, it'll probably be over soon.
Ida also perfectly embodies the core themes of the show, but I'll save that for a little later. Those are the main characters, but Owl House also has an expansive and equally compelling cast of secondary characters. Luce's first friends, Gus and Willow, are both extremely likable whenever they're on screen, with the episode that explores Willow's past being one of my favorites in the series. Among the many secondary characters, my favorite is probably Amity, to the surprise of no one who's actually watched the series. The progression her character takes along the course of the series is really compelling, and her growing relationship with Luz is super cute. But it's cute for all of the right reasons, and I'm not sure I've seen anybody else really talk about that. For a romantic relationship to really work as a story, you need to create characters who are both similar enough that the audience can buy why they would be into each other, and whose flaws can be overcome by the relationship with their partner. I think the Owl House does a remarkably good job walking that tightrope. It makes perfect sense that somebody with a stifling home and social life like Amity would be drawn to somebody as honest with themselves as Luz. And in a similar vein, I can totally see why Luz would admire Amity, considering how often her lack of self-control gets her into trouble. I want to see the two of them get together because they would help balance each other out and make a near unbeatable team. That good writing doesn't just extend to these two. All of the characters relate to each other in very natural and believable ways. And that makes the show's worlds feel a lot more alive. Speaking of the worlds, I can't believe I've been talking for this long and haven't mentioned the Owl House's stellar production values yet. Character animation is consistently expressive and does just as much as the writing and acting in telling the audience who these characters are. The art direction is also fantastic. The Boiling Isles is legitimately one of the freshest looking fantasy worlds in recent memory, and the color palette is strong and varied. As a whole, the show looks great, but when the animators feel like flexing, they really bring it during some of the Owl House's fight scenes. Gotta hand it to art director Rookie Kometa and animation supervisor Spencer Wan. They know what's good. And while we're still on the topic of production values, let me just say that while I have no experience or interest in studying music, I think the Owl House's OST fits the show really well. The instrumentation totally fits the spooky but adventurous vibe. Now, all of that other stuff is great, but it would feel kind of shallow if the Owl House didn't have something meaningful to say. But thankfully, it does. The whole series is about exploring the idea that there's no right or wrong way to live one's life, and that it's okay to do things differently as long as you're happy. We see it all the way back in the first episode. While Luz is trying to sneak into the conformatorium, she ends up meeting some of the other prisoners there, and quickly realizes that none of them are dangerous criminals or threatening villains. They're just people who don't meet the expectations of the world around them.
Wait. These aren't crimes. None of you actually did anything wrong. You're all just a bunch of weirdos. Like me.
The vilification of those who live their lives differently from everyone else is a consistent theme throughout the show. Ida is probably the most direct example of this. She's the most wanted person on the Boiling Isles. Not because she committed some unspeakable atrocity, but because she wanted to study all the different covens of magic instead of limiting herself to just one. The more Luz in the audience learns about what it means to be a witch in this world, the more apparent it becomes that a lot of the rules only exist to make everyone the same. In the world of the Owl House, villains aren't just criminals or psychopaths that want to destroy the world. They're people who try to force others to live in ways that aren't true to themselves. We see this everywhere, from how Amity's parents try to control every aspect of her life, to the principal at Hexside who requires all witches to study only a single coven, the Bat Queen who, in her attempts to protect those who have been forgotten, ends up restricting others' freedoms, Lilith who thinks doing what's best for her sister means forcing her to be just like her, and most importantly, Emperor Bellows.
I like your spirit. But try that again and things won't end well for you. Now, I'm just a humble messenger for the Titan. In the grand scheme of things, the Owl Lady's life is inconsequential.
Who uses his immense power and status to make the Boiling Isles the way he likes best. What I really appreciate about the Owl House's exploration of this idea is that it doesn't present a right way to live your life, even with Luz, King, and Ida. Gus and Willow are great examples of what I'm talking about. A lot of the early episodes see Ida and Luz criticizing the magic system, which forces witches to choose only a single coven. But the show never vilifies Gus or Willow for only practicing one coven. The Owl House makes it clear that people should just live in whatever way makes them happy. Ergo, Flow, Luz can be happy studying all types of magic, and Gus and Willow can be happy with just one. Neither is wrong in their approach because they're both pursuing what they want. I find real value in that message, even as an adult. I think it's easy today to look at somebody doing things differently than what we do and automatically think it's bad or wrong. I know I've done that on occasion, but what Owl House reminds me is that as long as you're not hurting anybody, there's no such thing as bad, only different. And it's that idea which has made the Owl House my favorite thing on TV right now.